This is TWiT.
We saw that Jeff Bezos has Blue Origin's company and a couple of other partners, including Boeing, are now talking about, by the end of the decade, putting the first commercial space station into orbit, which they described as a mixed-use business park, part hotel, part business centre, part research facility. It's a quite challenging proposition, considering that Blue Origin can't get anything into orbit as yet with their current rocket systems. The passenger systems from Boeing haven't yet worked. Indeed, their passenger capsule is back at the factory because it failed on its last attempt to try and get into orbit. Brianna, Padre, do you think this is a viable idea? Or should it be trying to build business parks in orbit? Go on, someone jump in.
Would I like them to? Yes. I mean, I'd love to see it because that's the vision of my childhood. Everyone's in a space station. Everyone's orbiting either the Earth or the Moon or in a Lagrange point. But as in terms of, does it make financial sense? Not really. I think we've proven that with the ISS. Yes, there's some interesting experiments, but it's far too expensive to escape our gravity well to have anything in a business park just so that it can be in space. It's going to be a prestige thing. It's going to be something that's used by the wealthy so that they can do PR shoots. But other than that, I mean, it's not really viable. The level of technology that we have, not just booster tech, not just to get out of the gravity well so that you're actually in orbit and not just falling quickly, it's not there. And more so, it's not going to be there until we stop using chemical propellants. And neither Blue Origin nor SpaceX nor NASA or any of the agencies are anywhere near that level of technology. So interesting idea, sure, for science fiction, not in my lifetime.
Interesting. I mean, Brianna, if you got the chance for an orbital holiday, would you take it? And do you think anyone else?
Yeah.
Well, that was quick, in a heartbeat. Yes.
Yeah. No, Frank and I talk about that all the time. Like this theoretical thing where an alien comes, you get to jump on a spaceship, like in Guardians of the Galaxy. You better believe I'm going. So Robert, I do share your pessimistic appraisal of the situation. I do think it's worth noting there are some unique things that can be done in space from a commercial standpoint. You know, my own husband works in biotech. I helped develop the coronavirus vaccine, and there are many kinds of drugs that could best be developed and manufactured in a zero-G environment. And there are all kinds of manufacturing issues like that. So I do think there's commercial value for that. I don't mean to get political, though, but this news does come out the exact same week that we are talking about a very substantial billionaires tax here in the United States that would be almost impossible for them to avoid in the way that it's written. And, you know, personally, if I got to choose between Jeff Bezos developing a hotel in space or taxing Jeff Bezos so we could fund NASA much more aggressively and have the public weigh in and do a lot more space exploration and development there, I would choose B all day, every day. So I hope that's the way the dice rolls there.
Well, indeed.
Also, can I geek out for just a second here?
Go for it.
So when you're dealing with space, there's primarily two issues that we have right now. I mean, well, three. The first is the propellant, getting out of the gravity well. But if you're in orbit or even on a lunar body, power and heat. You build up heat and it's almost impossible to get rid of it. And your power budget is incredibly limited. So I'm big on manufacturing in space. I mean, I love the idea that there are certain things that can be made better in a zero-G environment. But having a zero-G environment that provide both the manufacturing capabilities and the power to run the equipment and the ability to remove the heat that the equipment generates, that's not just a business park. I mean, that's building a factory in space. So again, I mean, that's several factors of complexity above what's being proposed as a business park.
Well, this is it. I mean, I guess you get nuclear reactors up there to provide power so you don't have to rely on solar, but that's a whole new kettle of fish going on.
Well, see, even then, because our nuclear reactor power right now, unless you're dealing with a radiothermal isotope generator, is basically steam power. It's a steam plant that uses a nuclear fire instead of burning something. The problem is none of those plants work unless you can get rid of the heat. That's how you have to condense the water. So if you're in space, it actually becomes far more difficult to do something like nuclear power. Essentially the only thing that works is solar. And you can't create enough PV space to run a standard factory with just solar power.
It's interesting. So we're going to have to wait for the space elevator, or is it,
I'm all about the space elevator. Give me the space elevator, please. Or just a big railgun so I can shoot payloads into low Earth orbit.
Well, Brianna you raised an interesting point on this, because you're right. The billionaire tax proposals did come out this week. Obviously, the tech industry is very likely. The leaders of the tech industry are right in the firing line on this. From the proposals that they have, it doesn't. It's not as though Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos is going to be hanging around with a cup outside Grand Central Station, trying to pay off the mortgage that way. But it does seem a bit rich that particularly for Elon Musk, has been very vocal against it this week. And considering the guy did get a certain amount of government subsidies just to get his business off the ground, quite literally, it does seem slightly mawkish just to say, well, actually, yeah, but I'm not that keen on this tax business. Do you think it's going to go through? Is Congress actually going to act on this?
I think it's up to Joe Manchin, unfortunately, and I think we're going to get more information about the text of the bill this week, and fingers crossed on that. I think what I would like to see is, this isn't my analogy, but it's one that I've heard frequently. A lot of these billionaires, it's almost a Batman situation where they, the company that like Wayne Enterprises, where they make all their money, causes all these problems for society, and then you have to have the billionaire Batman go out and stop all the consequences from it. Personally, what I would like to see is more money taken from the billionaires, where we as the public can kind of decide which way this goes. And just one more thing about this, Robert, as long as we're talking about the nitty-gritty details of how we actually do something like this in space, one of the things that we've tried to figure out for a long time is how to stop the loss of muscle mass in space, because you go up there and your muscles atrophy. And one of the things that I'm so proud of my husband for is, while he was working at Novartis here in Boston, his name is actually, he helped develop the patent for one of the drugs that's going to do this. They came up with the drug, and you can literally, according to the patent, it causes you to just automatically generate all this muscle mass. And they see it and they're like, oh my gosh, people are going to be using this to abuse sports, and it's going to like blow all
I have
these.
to say that was my first thought as well.
Right. Yeah.
No, I'm training for space.
Right. But this drug could be very helpful for getting us long-term letting humans live in space. So
it's interesting. We have a bunch of drugged up astronauts who are managing to. But it is a serious problem. It takes 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. Same to come back. That's an awful lot of muscle mass to lose. And particularly if you're, also thinking longer term, if you're actually born on Mars, and you grow up with that kind of gravitational stress, you probably couldn't come back to Earth unless you've got some serious muscle development going on, because the gravity would just crush you. Is it, if we're going to become a spacefaring species, as I hope that we do, it's obviously going to take some fairly serious physiological changes in humanity. And also, sort of where are we going in terms of how that's going to equalize out when things get back to Earth. But I have to say, Brianna, when you told me about that drugs, my first thought was pro sports people are going to be on this like a rat up a drain pipe.
100%. If I'm remembering it correctly, they were trying to figure out ways to let sports teams try to detect it ahead of time, because they knew it was going to be such a thing that would be abused.
So put a marker in the drug so that it shows up. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They could also help elderly people, right? You fall and break a hip, it's because you lose muscle mass. So there we go.
Yeah, we shall have to see. But well, hopefully we'll get out there. We're starving in the midst of plenty at the moment, considering that most asteroids contain enough metals to deal with the markets for quite some time. But still, readers have pointed out that, of course, we could have the spinning space stations that would engender a certain amount of gravity, but that requires a massive space station to actually get it organised. I love 2001, but We're a long, long way from that. Arthur C. Clarke go on, Padre.
We don't actually have the material science to do that yet. Spinning a space station is a way to generate a force that will resemble gravity, but the force that you would experience on the hub of that spinning structure would tear any current material to pieces. So it looks great in sci-fi, but not incredibly practical. There actually is a show that deals with this really, really well. If you've read the Expanse series of books, or even watched the show, that's actually something that it builds into it. That was Abraham put that into the writing of the show. So that much is actually realistic.
That's interesting, because, I mean, when Arthur C. Clarke always regretted the introduction of the transistor, because when his idea for satellites was based on valve technology, and that's why he thought that manned space technology manned space flight would become essential, basically, for the maintenance of satellites, because somebody would need to swap out the vacuum tubes. And once they broke, and in later years, he was kind of like, the transistor really mucked that up. You can just send machinery up there now. It's painful, but yes.